Hi everybody, welcome to another Chats with Children. I hope you're safe and well. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Deegan, who is the lead tutor for RSSL's Training Faculty. And today we're going to be talking about auditing, which funny enough is, you may be surprised to know, a subject close to my heart, as my dad used to be a chief internal auditor for a local council. So I don't know anything about auditing, but I did used to hear a lot about it when I was younger. So Peter, first of all, it's lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Pleasure to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. And where are you calling in from this morning?
I live in Cheshire, which is about 40 miles south of Manchester, in the northwest of England right now.
Fantastic. Well, I should have put my United shirt on, or you might be a Liverpool fan. I don't know.
Well, I'm a Yorkshireman, so
all right, Leeds then, or Sheffield.
So I'm more of a cricket person than football.
All right, cool. Well, look, before we start talking about auditing within the pharma sector, for viewers who are not familiar with your own background, could you give me a quick overview of your own background?
Yes, I'm a chemist by academic training. I started in the QC laboratories for a small pharmaceutical company after I graduated. Was doing my qualified person training course, needed to sort of get a bit more experience and variety than just tablets. So I joined what was ICI at Macclesfield in the 90s, which then became Zeneca, AstraZeneca. And essentially, I've been a QA career professional. I've always worked in QA, both in GMP. I've done R&D QA as well, worked in regulatory, worked in training. But I suppose if you cut me in the middle and you did that stick of rock, I think auditing would be there. So I'm a career auditor as well as a career quality professional.
All right, interesting. All right, well, look, one question I've got for you, as I said, was my dad was in auditing, but what is the difference between auditing within pharma and other industries?
In truth, it's all the same. You just audit against different standards. Right. And it's very interesting that ISO have got an international standard, and we've got IRCA who certify all the auditing courses these days. They're international. You know, I was really privileged to present in Japan in 2015 to the IRCA forum, and there were 3,500 auditors. Only about 50 were in pharmaceuticals. So it's an industry standard defined way of accounting. If you're meeting compliance, whatever your industry standards are they meeting them?
Right. And what would you say are the challenges that auditors face in pharma in comparison to other industries?
Well, pharmaceuticals is a very interesting area because it's got some pure standards. It's got the good manufacturing practices. In the UK, you've got human medicines regulations now, you've got the European Udrelex guidances, you've got the European regulations in Europe, you've got the CFRs in America. They're all pretty much the same, and they've all learned from those errors over the 50 years from the thalidomide, etc., disasters. So we've set pure standards. However, the challenges in pharma is they ask us that we've got to do audits, but GMP doesn't specify how to audit, and that's the biggest challenge. And what my experience is when I get people that I sort of mentor or coming on our courses, where do I start? I've been asked to do an audit, and I know the GMPs, but how do I ask the right questions? How do I get the check? How do I get the facts? And that's the challenges, I think.
Right. Well, that leads on quite nicely, because you just said, obviously, that GMP mandates that audits must be undertaken.
Yeah.
But there's no auditing standards to process defined by GMP. So how do auditors get instructions on how to do audits?
So you have an international standard, an ISO standard on auditing, and that's been written by a very broad international committee across all industries. And really, it's sort of got the pure essence of how to audit, the structural auditing. So you can audit against this standard in any industry. What it does, it teaches you the how to plan, how to prepare, how to review documentation, how to conduct the opening meetings, how to conduct the audit, etc., how to do the closing meeting, how to do the reporting. But each industry has its own standards. And I remember even when I was on my first auditing training course, being trained myself, and we had a case study, and I went, "You're out of compliance." And the trainer went, "With what?" And I said, "You're just out of compliance. It just feels wrong." He says, "Where is the written standard that says I have to conform? Because if you don't have a standard, How can I be out of compliance with that? If you don't have a peg in the ground, if you don't have words that say this must be achieved, how can you do that? I think that's the greatest skill of an auditor, is to be objective and be able to get those facts to be able to say, you are required to do this. Please provide me with the data. Are you achieving it? And that's when your then professional assessment comes in about how significant is that observation in terms of conformance or non-conformance.
Right. And which standards do auditors use to assess compliance?
So in the pharmaceutical industry, we've almost like got two processes, really. You've got what I call inside the factory, GMPs. You know, the GMPs and Nudralex require self-inspection to be done. That's a misunderstood term, because is self-inspection done by the production department? Is it an independent audit by the QA? Self-inspection means the company must account for its compliance itself. Okay, right. You've got that. And then you've got the independence of audits, because that then mitigates the human errors. So you've got the quality assurance function that come and do classic audits of the production line. But this is against GMP. I've got a blister line, I'm making tablets, I've got a process. What the GMP says with regards to premises and equipment, is that controlled? Is the line clearance done? It's very pure, I think. And then also as well, you've got the auditing of those contract manufacturers, but they're still manufacturing to your GMP standards. So it's GMP, it's within a box, very clear. We've got the orange guide, it's very clear. The biggest challenge area is what I call the pharmaceutical supply chain. So right. We've now got to audit and account for our suppliers. Annex 16 for qualified person release requires the QP to understand that supply chain and be assured that that supply chain is working well. But if you go into a supplier who is mainly making foodstuffs and you're buying that modified starch, they may not know GMP, they may not understand. Right. The supply chain is really diverse. I've audited farms in Indonesia making cinchona bark for quinine extract. You know, how on earth are they going to know what GMP is? So that's the biggest challenge I find in pharmaceutical auditing, is the supply chain. It's so diverse and so many different standards. You've got to understand which standards I'm auditing against. Auditing is the same process, but it's the standards that I think that are the greatest challenge as well.
And do you think, though, talking about supply chain, particularly over the last few years now, where supply chain has become such a challenge for a lot of companies within pharma, and therefore has become more diverse, if you like, because people have had to go to more sources, how has that impacted auditors in terms of auditing that supply chain? Because obviously, if you're an auditor and you go into a company and they've had regular suppliers and they've had that supply chain, in some ways the data will be there a lot easier to access. Whereas actually, if you've got multiple suppliers now in that supply chain, they all will have their own different standards, as we're talking about, and maybe have their own interpretations. How do auditors overcome that challenge where there are so many different possible links within that chain, as opposed to whether you only used to be one, maybe, or two?
That's a really good question, thank you, because that diversity and separation and that Venn of the supply chain is the greatest challenge. Number one, as an auditor, you find out what is the standard that I'm working against. What standards do they manufacture their product? Is it an ISO standard? Are they working to ISO 9001 certification? Are they working to packaging standards? What standards are they working from? You have to read those standards. And then when you're auditing, all you're doing is saying, here are your standards that you have to work to. Show me how you're meeting that compliance.
Right. And are those standards sort of set up? Is it incumbent on the manufacturer to have set those standards for their suppliers at the beginning, or do those standards have to come in? Because obviously they're working to a particular standard, hopefully, or is that something the auditor has to bring with them when they do the audit?
Well, the way I see it is that the auditor audits backwards as well as forwards. So audits their own company. Have I set a clear contract? Right. Have I set a clear quality and technical agreement? We always know, was it Deming that said, end-to-end processes work okay, it's at the interfaces where it goes wrong. And that's where the quality and technical agreement is really important. It specifies roles and responsibilities. It specifies accountabilities across a diverse interface. So if you've set the right contract, if you set the right specification for that product, and then you go through your procurement and your due diligence, that's what the auditor is trying to say. Have we got any gaps in that? Is what we are ordering what we know is coming? And that's that backwards and forwards. So there's in the ISO 9000 in the ISO 19011 international auditing standard, a lot of the audit is what they call the stage one, where you're doing the documentation audit of your company and their company before you even hit site and actually look at the factory.
Fantastic. Right. Well, thank you for explaining that. And one other question I've got for you is the role of digitalization now within pharma, because obviously digital transformation has always been a big topic within pharma over the last few years. And obviously with the pandemic, it's accelerated.
Yeah.
But I know, speaking to lots of people about digitalization, how they talk about obviously within GMP compliance that you need to have a paper trail and track everything. But a lot of stuff was done literally on paper rather than on the cloud or whatever. So how has digitalization impacted auditing within pharma? And do you see companies having gone far enough so far within digitalization, or is there still a lot to do?
I think we're on a journey, and I think we're just scratching the surface of that journey. As a qualified person, and the audits that I conduct of companies, it is still manual. There's a very interesting description I always use, is digitalization means making the source data into granular data so that the computer can manage that and interpret that. And that actually designs human error out. And digitalization's aim should be to design human error out, because the only time we actually make errors is when humans come in and try their best, but we're fallible. Whereas, and that's where assurance comes in, to my mind, is a probability of success, and we have second person verification and QA independence, etc. But digitalization helps us, I think, for the future, bring a verification for our patients. It's an infallible, validated system. So the challenges I see today is, number one, the source systems that they're storing that data are really your Documentum type, PDF, Word. So there's data within those documents, and that's really hard to get out. So I think the transformation for the future in digitalization should be looking at your source systems, looking at the outcome, and looking at digitalization as a verification strategy, because that's then it will self-audit.
And one thing sort of following on from that, and I just started struggling, I should have maybe asked this beforehand, was obviously we have gone through the pandemic and there was a lot of remote working and a lot of people couldn't go and do physical audits. So from your experience over the last few years, how has the remote audits been? And is there a future now for remote audits as well as in-person audits?
I think it's one of the biggest positive changes of our age. If we look at the pandemic and try and see benefits or learning from it, I think I have flown to Copenhagen in a day and back and done an audit and thought I could have done that remotely, and I think it's thinking differently. Having said that, you've got ICHQ9, risk management, risk assessment. Your audit should be risk assessed to say what's the benefit and risks in doing a remote audit. Your field work, your paperwork can be done remotely. And now they've got, I was auditing a company in the Northwest, and now they've got one of these 360 cameras, and they've actually got an on-site video on their website for pre-audit to visualize the blind even before you come in, even if you wanted to come in physically, and it can answer a lot of questions because it's that visuality that I think remoteness brings. It brings challenges with it. There are cultural challenges across the world of trust, etc. But I think it's the future, and I think we should embrace it, but it shouldn't replace that human intelligence. We're not at that artificial intelligence right side long-term strategic change yet, but why don't we try?
Fantastic. Right. Well, I know we're running out of time, Peter. So one question for you then is, as you are the lead tutor for RSL's training faculty, I know you've got some courses coming up on these very topics. So what
Yeah.
courses have you got and when are they running?
We've got a one-day course to Introduction to Auditing. That's for junior members, etc., just to get your head around, okay, well, how do I structure my day type thing. But we've also got the IRCA certified lead auditor courses, which are a 5-day accelerated learning course. So the first course is our pure GMP. So what IRCA specify numbers, and they specify the standards. So their PR325 is GMP pharmaceutical quality systems. So our standards are ICHQ10 and the UDRELX GMPs. In the 2022 Orange Guide that's just been published, MHRA have clearly said they're still going to be auditing against UDRELX standards, even though the human medicines regulations are the law in the UK for sort of the post-Brexit standardization. But it is designed for people who audit the factory, do the self-inspection, working in GMP. One of the benefits of this is with ICHQ10 coming in, Rizwan, one of the challenges that GMPs had is it was so specific on the factory floor, never talked about management responsibility. And that's where ISO 9001 and the GMPs married beautifully in ICHQ10. So that course, we also teach the delegates how to audit management responsibility and accountability from ICHQ10, as well as detailed how to structure your audit day on a blister line or a oral solid product line type thing. So that's the GMP one. And then for the pharmaceutical diverse supply chain, we've got our PR330 variant, and that's unique to our SSL. It teaches you how to audit against the diverse standards. What we have to do is apply specific standards. So we particularly apply the pharmaceutical quality group supplier standards, PS 9000, and then the core framework for the week is ISO 9001 because of those diverse. But that supply chain auditing course is designed for people auditing a diverse supply chain, because you've got so many standards. We teach you how to focus on the right standard at the right time at that interview. And also as well to practice against auditees who will maybe not be used to being audited. So that's the challenge, and those are the real world case studies that we bring.
Brilliant. Well, there you go, viewers. If you would like to know more about auditing and you're involved in auditing within pharma, then the links to the courses will be above the video, so you can find out more about those courses and the other courses that RSSL do as well. And if you've got any questions for Peter based on what we talked about today, then feel free to put them in the comments below.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure to answer any questions.
In fact, we haven't even touched on Annex 1
and
talk about the impact of that. So, because I thought that would take another 20 minutes. So that's,
I was going to say, that's another 5 days interview, that one.
And I know you're busy, man. So look, we'll talk about it maybe another time. So look, Peter, I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me today.
My pleasure.
I think was the 100 final yesterday? I can't remember, but if you're watching the cricket, then you're a cricket fan, you might be watching the 100 anyway.
Oh, absolutely. I've been watching that. Yes, absolutely. It's been great.
It's so fantastic. Well, look, thank you very much for taking time out. It's lovely to meet you. And as I said, viewers, if you'd like to know more about the courses themselves, the links are above the video, so you can learn more about what RSSL are doing around the auditing area within pharma and GMP. And if you like, as I said, if you've got any questions for Peter, then please put them
absolutely
below the video in the comment section. I'm sure we'll be happy to answer. Peter, thank you once again for your time, and viewers, thank you for watching. Until next time, as always, stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye.